Hello everybody, my name is Graham Hofe and I'm your host today, and we're going to bring you something to put a little light on the subject of light in offices and the home. Now, some people might not even think about light being an ergonomic device or principle or anything like that, but actually every time I've been to an office, it's the lighting that people have been complaining about, even beyond sitting down. So I've got some people that I want to introduce you to, and we're going to talk about light a little bit more. I have here with me Stephen Edwards, who's had an experience of over 30 years in lighting. Good afternoon, Stephen. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon.
He is the designer of the product that we're about to talk about, and sitting slightly above him to the left is John van Hooft, the CEO of BakkerElkhuizen. Thanks for joining us as well, John.
Good afternoon from the Netherlands.
And you've been involved in the R&D of this product as well, haven't you?
Yes, Stephen and I work very closely together to make a very nice and interesting innovation.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Bring some light to the home and offices.
Absolutely. Say an incredibly important part of anybody's experience in terms of working in an environment. Have you got enough light? Have you not got enough light? What does that light bring to you in terms of experience? Can you see what you're working on? How does that light make you feel? If you have any particular kind of disability, how does that light impact you? I'm sure we'll cover all of those things this afternoon. I'm going to start with a poll to see really what you believe in all of this. So if we could bring out the first of the polls, and here we go. The first poll, which I am now sharing, hopefully you can all see that, is: are you happy with the lighting in your home? Are you happy with the lighting in your home? So I'm sharing that now. If everyone that is watching could participate in that, yes or no, are you happy with the lighting in your home? Just give people a second to answer that. I love how it tells you 91% of the audience. That's good. Everybody else, please hurry up. I know if you're boiling the kettle, that's fine. It's understandable. But if you could just come back and do your vote quickly. I think we'll take that any second now. It looks like, gentlemen, that a lot of people are happy with the lighting in their home. Would you say that that would be the same in terms of people's experience of lighting in an office, though, maybe?
Well, if you look to the answers, already 1/4 of the people are not happy with the lighting. Yeah, depends on what kind of experiences they base it on. And I'm sure that with some extra background on what light can do to your body, to your brain, to your performance, etc., that maybe people will reconsider their answer. But I leave that up to the expert, Stephen, of course.
I was going to say, let's go over to Stephen, who's going to talk to us now. But I think one of the things we might want to think about while Stephen is talking is the fact that actually when people are thinking about lighting in the home, are they thinking about when they're working in the home as well? Because that may be different from the rest of the lighting around the house. Stephen, over to you.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to add my own welcome. I hope everybody can see my screen. That about me. So 37 years I've been working in the lighting industry. I first started back in 1985. It seems such a long time ago, really, when I think about it. But I've always been involved in lighting from an early age. My stepfather owned a lighting company, so it was very much in our blood.
Sorry to interrupt you, Stephen.
Yeah.
But it looks like your shared screen is not visible. Graham, do you experience the same?
Yeah, I've still got the same at the moment.
Okay, so I can see my screen.
But maybe you didn't push it to share through Demio.
So I will close it and show. Can you?
Do we need to close down the poll? About there it is.
There it is.
Thank you.
So I'll start from the beginning. Can you see my full screen now?
Yes, I can.
Thank you very much. So I'll begin again. 37 years I've been working in the lighting industry, and I've been basically involved in many aspects of the lighting industry, from planning, technical detailing, I guess, also luminaire design, the measurement of luminaires. And I've worked with a lot of leading architects and lighting designers across the world. I worked for one of the largest lighting companies for many years, and I've worked in the Netherlands, in Austria. I've worked in America, most of the Middle East, and even Russia. And I've built up a large experience of lighting. And there was always one thing that used to, I think, captured my interest some years ago, and that was active lighting and how we could use the changing color of artificial light and see whether it would influence our behavior or help us with our behavior in the built environment, which is, of course, our offices and working from home. I wanted to start off with basically an idea, what are the properties of daylight? And I think I could break it down into 4 things. If you take a photograph every hour or so, and you place them side by side like you have in this image here, you can see that the color changes and the intensity changes and the direction of the light changes. So basically, the direction of light, of course, changes as the sun rises and falls in the sky. Due to its penetration of the atmosphere, of course, its intensity changes. So, of course, it's much brighter at noon than it is in the morning or in the afternoon. And of course, its color changes as light enters the atmosphere. It has to travel through a larger amount of atmosphere. This is something that's actually changes the color spectrum of the light. And that's also called a Rayleigh scattering effect. But basically, this has an impact on how we see daylight. Of course, for 200,000 years, we have evolved with daylight. It's central to our daytime and our body clock. The sun has, of course, been our only form of natural light for these 200,000 years. And the only other artificial light source that we had was restricted to fire. If you then look at how does light affect us, well, there are 3 main parts to this. I'll begin with visually. So, of course, visually, this allows us to do our tasks, perceive the world around us. And of course, we then move on to the emotional part of light. This is linking us to the natural world, but the built environment and also architectural spaces and how we feel about them. And it also, of course, affects our mood and how we feel when we're in a space. And of course, biologically, we're looking at the internal clock. So the synchronization of our physiology in the form of circadian rhythm, and that's a Latin word for circadium, which is means approximately a day in Latin. Now, of course, if you think about these 3 aspects, visually, emotionally, and biologically, they really conform to the 3 main aspects of architecture and how we feel about architecture and how it affects us. And of course, we live in an environment where we've built everything. And if you wanted to take this to its more ancient roots, you can then go back to Marcus Vitruvius, who was an ancient Roman architect. And he's quite famous for his 10 books of architecture, which were published 20 or to 30 years before the birth of Christ. And we know this because it's the only documentation that exists from antiquity, and it's the only text that we have found as early as this that basically links the human form and architecture. And in many respects, it touches on the idea of the connection between building and the amount of daylight that enters it. So it's a very salient thing that we've been thinking about this not just recently, but for a very long time. So how we see light, if we remember our biology classes, we've long understood the three types of sensors, I guess you call them, that build up our visual system, cones and rods. So the three cone types see the three primary colors, red, green, and blue, that make up the white spectrum, the visual spectrum that we see. And together with those, we have rods, and they're responsible for our peripheral vision and also seeing in very low lighting levels. But it wasn't really until 2002 when scientists discovered an additional photoreceptor behind the rods and cones, which were found to be filled with a chemical called melanopsin. These receptors, they have an unusual name. It doesn't really fall off the tongue. They're called intrinsically photoreceptive retinal ganglion cells, IPRGCs for short. But these are not really linked to the visual system. And if you follow the signals that come from these sensors, they deviate from the optic nerve and are diverted into the pituitary gland. And this is really at the base of the brain. And they also connect directly into what's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is another unusual thing that we've only just found out about, the SCN. So this is basically two grain-sized nuclei that are basically the body's central clock. And these parts of the brain are responsible for the control of our subconscious and metabolic processes, together with the pineal gland, the hypothalamus, and the adrenal gland. And of course, these are also responsible for the secretion or suppression of the three main hormones that we're interested in when it comes to how light and how the circadian rhythm forms a 24-hour timeline for us. So melatonin, cortisol, and serotonin are the main hormones involved in this. If I then look into the influence on our biology, of course, melatonin, it's a relaxed hormone, and it's produced during the evening time, and it basically allows us to move into our sleep state. Blue light is very important in respect to melatonin, because blue light suppresses its production. And this is why it's important that if you're watching a screen or you are working late into the evening, it's important that you don't overload your system with too much blue light. And there are various settings on your phones and screens that you can use to reduce the blue content in the light that you're looking at. And of course, if we then move into the other main hormones, cortisol, which is of course a stress hormone. This is produced later in the day, and it also helps to prepare you for the daytime. So it comes on around 3 o'clock in the morning, early on, and and together with serotonin, which is this mood elevating hormone, it's a sort of natural antidepressant. And you tend to produce large amounts of this when you do a lot of exercise. So it's like the feel-good hormone. But of course, if you then look at how these hormones are actually interacting with each other during the day, you can see that daylight would have a very strong influence, on their production. And you can see that at certain times of the day and nighttime, these main hormones are being produced or suppressed. The other one problem, of course, that is if you produce too much melatonin, this can cause problems when it comes to SAD. So these seasonal disorders, when your body isn't receiving enough daylight of the right type. So normally affecting people in the northern hemisphere, but up to 15% of people suffer from this in latitudes that are further north. Basically, your body isn't getting the internal natural cues that it would get from daylight. So basically causing in certain months of the year when there's not enough daylight, basically a buildup of melatonin that your body can't get rid of. And so this causes all sorts of things, and it can cause things like depression and ill health. If I look at the adverse effects of this on your performance and motivation, this is one of those things that is normally helped by looking at bright lights. So you have a excuse me, you have a bright light source with a very blue intense part of the spectrum. Then this helps to suppress the melatonin production. And looking up into one of those for maybe half an hour a day is the only real way of reducing the effects of SAD. But of course, this is not really a practical way for a lot of people to work with. It's an intensely bright source of light, and certainly too bright to work with if you were in an office space, for example. So if we then look at our relationship with artificial light in the modern era, again, we're all pretty aware of this. Daylight, of course, is one of those things that we've grown with. And if you look at fire and our relationship with that, it's a very easy light source in the sense that firelight and candlelight and oil lamps are very similar in their color spectrum and don't really affect us in any physiological way, even though it's an artificial light source. Of course, most of us are working in environments where the artificial light is very high, and if you can imagine spending up to 80% of your working life, 90% of your working life in spaces that are basically statically lit and lit to a very high level, this is bound to have had a fairly adverse effect on how you feel about the space. And if I then looked at what people tend to complain about most in offices, this is quite salient when we look at the poll that we've just had. A quarter of the people that have answered said that they're not particularly happy with the office lighting in particular. You could, if you maybe asked the question slightly differently, is maybe asked, well, how do you feel about the artificial lighting in your home that you use to work with? This is probably slightly different to maybe the question of how do you feel about light at home? Are you happy with it? I think that most of us are generally happy with our lighting at home, but then that's a very personal thing, and it's not a light source perhaps that we're using as a work light. I know that my own work light was something that I thought about a lot as I was developing or helping to develop this luminaire energy by light. It was one of those things I just thought, I wish I had a nice light source that gave me a feeling that I was in a balanced environment when it came to the light. It wasn't too bright, and it was the right color for me, and it was the right intensity for me. And if I get back to the main questions that people ask themselves when they're looking at their workspace, and this could be at home or the office, air quality is one of those things that is spoken about. And I think that the next thing after that is, of course, is noise. And if you then add in your furniture, these three main aspects are the ones that are highlighted. But the one that basically trumps all of them is the quality of light. You can, of course, engineer everything, and that includes making your air warmer or cooler or smell better or fresher and so on. And you can, of course, engineer the sound quality in a building by adding acoustics and everything else. And of course, you can buy decent office chairs and desks. And the one thing that is kind of very unengineered, it seems, is office lighting. It's controlled by quite restricted norms. So you're only allowed to put a certain amount of light into a space. And the only reason for this is that you have to adhere to certain energy values within a building. And I think that it doesn't really make sense when you look at some of the norms, because it's so restrictive. And I think that the quality of light has been compromised. And so this is, I think, something that a lot of the new norms in particular are looking at this. When you look at new building standards, or the European norms 12464.1, where human-centric lighting is becoming a very important aspect in the design of a building, and its lighting in particular. And of course, we know all this because a lot of studies have been done over the years, and I think that the Fraunhofer Institute, which has been responsible for some of the most in-depth studies, this source data has come from BakkerElkhuizen. This is a German institution. It's Licht.de, and they are very good at publishing information about the standards of lighting and all aspects of artificial lighting in the workspace in particular. And you can see that this basically shows us that even in summertime, we are spending up to 33% of our time in buildings that are artificially lit. And this has, I think, an aspect of importance when, if you're designing a building, then you should try and put as much daylight into that space as possible. And of course, that's fine in the summertime, but 72% of the time, you're spending your time in a building that's artificially lit. And if that light is static and unmoving, well, that's really not the best place to be. Also, when it comes to what people like about, or the differences that people have, because everybody's different about light quality. And if you look at how light is measured, to give you an idea, one candle light is equivalent to 1 lux. And in an office space, you would normally have 500 lux as your office lighting on your work area. And if you can see here, street lighting is around 10 lux. And if you were watching or the lighting levels in a stadium, especially if it was for cameras, then you're looking at 1,400 lux. But of course, everybody's different, and depending on your age. But generally, people like to have more than 500 lux. 500 lux is the standard lighting level for an office space. and 800 lux seems to be the preferred lighting level. It's also interesting that older people like a little less light and younger people want more light. So this is something that's sort of contrary to my understanding, and certainly was a surprise to me. But also it's the color temperature that people have differences over. And again, this shows how individual we all are. You can see here that the most people like to have 4,000 to 5,000 Kelvin. Now, light is measured, the color of light is measured in Kelvin. And if you look at the sun, it's around 5,000 Kelvin. So you can see here that there's a correlation between natural daylight color and what we'd like to have as our artificial color temperature in our workspaces. So 4,000 to 5,000 Kelvin. Most office spaces in Europe, for your information, are generally lit between 3,000 and 4,000 Kelvin. So a large proportion of us actually would prefer the light to be a lot cooler in the office space. And if you can see here, okay, if I was using artificial light to boost my biorhythm activation, I can call it here, you can see that you can engineer the light source within a space so that as the daytime progresses, you're basically starting with a warmer and then moving into a very cool light in the morning and over lunch, and a higher lighting level. If you can see that there's a blue line here, which is basically the light color change. So as you can see, at 10 o'clock in the morning, we're moving into a much colder light, and then even into a much colder light still over this sort of this 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon dip. You've then got this lighting level that really starts off at quite a high level compared to normal office lighting at around 800 lux, and then drifting off lower to around 450 lux in the afternoon, while the light is also becoming warmer. So if you engineer this is very similar to what you would expect from the sun. So we're trying to mimic the sun's properties in artificial light. And you might want to consider, why is this so important to us? And I think that as a manager of a business, if you look at the cost that you've invested in your people and over the lifetime of your business and building, you'll see that 90% of the cost has been spent on your employees. If you then look at the other 10% of the cost of running your business, you can see that just over 9% of the cost has now been invested into the building, and that doesn't really matter whether you've rented it or bought it. And then if you look at, okay, if I was then to introduce something that had a fundamental impact, positive impact, you could then choose lighting, and you can see that the overall costs of introducing even a very advanced control system that and lighting system that mimics daylight is very small compared to the overall general cost that you've already invested. And seeing as this would have such a positive impact on your employees, I think it's something that we all should consider. And I know that when it comes to the new European norm, workspace lighting, as I mentioned, the 12464.1 and the WELL building standards point to active lighting as a preferred solution and best practice. So for your most valuable asset as your employees, good lighting, I think is the best investment, is the smallest investment that you'll make that will probably have the most positive impact on how your people feel about their workspace. I think if I can open that now to any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thank you. If you have got any questions for Stephen, do please put them into the chat, and our people will have a look at those, and we'll make sure that these get asked. What I think we'll do at this moment as well is if we could just bring up second poll. I'll just share this one with you. So you can see the answers for the first poll again there. Are you happy with your lighting in your home workplace? You know, the majority of people said yes. Are you still, having had that further information, happy with the lighting in your home workplace? Be interesting to see whether we've got any swing after all of that information. Stephen, just share with us again, what was the standards again? Because I know everybody's going to go and Google it after this. Did you say 12.6.4.1? Was that?
Yes, there are two main standards. There's the new European workspace lighting norm,
yep,
which is called 12464.1. That's the norm.
Catchy title.
So if you look that up, it's one of those ones. There are certain parts that you can find on the internet. It's one of those norms that you have to purchase, but the most relevant parts we can give you, no problem.
Yep.
And the next one is the well building standards, or the well building standard, and that's a kind of a European. That's an international standard, so it also covers America.
Okay. So if anyone wants more details on those afterwards, they can let us know, and we can get back in touch with them with that as well. We've had 63% of the audience answer. The rest are off brewing a cup of coffee and using some energy. So the answers are pretty much the same at the moment, 70%, 30%. So it sounds about the same. Over to John. Hi, John.
Hi, Graham. Thanks. First of all, thank you, Stephen, for summarizing 37 years of experience and knowledge in this short time of period. It's up to me now to give you a little bit more details and insight on the NG Light, the luminaire that Stephen, the idea of the luminaire that Stephen came to me, and he asked if I would was willing to listen to the background of it, and it really made me enthusiastic. And we started the joint journey to develop the Energy by Light. And even during that process, we really came across where our collaboration really benefited both of us. But I will tell you that during my presentation. So I'm going to share now my presentation. And if I'm right, everybody sees now the presentation. Well, obviously, to what Stephen told me and the background information is that light can give us really a lot of energy on different levels, biologically, emotionally, but also, let's say, performance, better sleep. So light really can become an important part, as long as we are able to mimic sunlight. And with that knowledge that Stephen shared, we really started to think about, okay, what kind of solution we can create to give the right direction, the right intensity, the right color at the right moment of the day. And that's what we included in a complete new design of a luminaire. We called it the Energy by Light because it really gives you energy during the day. It really supports your biorhythm. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it. Well, what does the Energy by Light? You could see it as a luminaire where you can change the color temperature, you can change the brightness, and you can adjust it manually to the right brightness and color temperature at the right time of the day. But I have to admit, and probably Stephen knows much more, and he can dream about the right color temperature and the right brightness at the right time with his 37 years of experience. But to me, as one of the most lazy testers and users in the world, I had no idea what was the best color temperature and brightness at a certain moment. And of course, yes, I was also interested in the circadian rhythm and the background information. But what was important for me is that the end result is that we create a luminaire that automatically changes the intensity and color temperature, not only in general, but also similar to how the sun works for me in the summertime, but also with taking in mind SAD problems, especially in wintertime. So what we did is we created an automatically changing intensity and color temperature with all kinds of preferences that you could adjust. And our goal is to promote a sense of well-being, as well also productivity, as well also improving sleep for people. So the whole idea is that we support you with the energy by light to your natural circadian rhythm. And we're not aware of all the influences of artificial light, but we have created an interesting expert video together with Stephen, and I will show you in a few minutes that video, and then you will probably recognize some things that are happening to us every moment of the day, caused by artificial light, caused by a lack of sunlight, all these kind of things that really can influence our body and mind. Stephen already mentioned about the light, the amount of light that we should get during the day, and more or less, if I use the picture that Stephen also used, but then in different sections, we would love to have more or less daylight mimicking in our working environment, which could be, of course, office, but which could be also home office. And especially at home office, it's very hard. And in this hybrid working era, we're in the middle of it, thanks to COVID, lockdowns, etc. We would love to have a luminaire that starts as a beautiful sunrise in a reddish white color in the morning, moves towards the more bluish white light around midday, and in the afternoon turning back to this warm reddish light in the afternoon as a kind of sunset, because that's what we are used to and that's how we evolved during thousands of years. To enable that, what we need is a tunable LED light that can offer us this color temperature range, but also all color parts, because white light is a mixture of all these colors. And we need a kind of active, intelligent control system. And that's what we created by the additional app which comes with the energy by light, and all to mimic daylight. Really a kind of natural change in color temperature and brightness over time. Not only for the office, but also, of course, for your home office. And for employers, it's very hard to organize good lighting at home office environments. It's not easy for facility departments to visit every employee and make some changes to the ceiling lighting, etc., to create these kind of environments. What they need is a kind of mobile solution. And what we see with some customers is that even according European law, that lighting, good lighting, is also one of the requirements for a good workplace setup. Actually, not only in the office, but also when you allow people, or you even more or less, you could say, force people to work from home partly, also at the home office. Well, a few details about the energy by light. After this webinar, you get, of course, the handouts, but you get also some background information, a brochure of the energy by light, and also a brochure with all the specs of the energy by light. we not only offer you a kind of cloud of ambient light, which is important to activate your circadian rhythm, but we offer also within the energy by light through the task window, the task light that directly lights your workspace. And that combined with the ambient light. And how we have organized that, we have one light source, so one LED that not only gives you the direct task light, but also thanks to smart, how you say that, folies that we use in the energy by light, also a creation of a cloud of ambient light. Because what we see often with, let's say, lighting at home or even regular desk lighting, it only gives you the horizontal lighting. And for your circadian rhythm, your biorhythm, it's also very important to get this vertical lighting, the ambient light. We have a very wide color temperature range to mimic sunlight as much as possible, taking in mind the information that Stephen shared about what kind of color temperature people prefer. This range really covers the vast majority of the response to the preferable color temperature. And of course, brightness, we have to be able to mimic the sunrise. We have to be able to mimic a sun at the highest top and also mimic sunset again. And we have this brightness range. Then the energy by light comes with an app. And here I mentioned in my presentation app control, but actually it's a little bit different. Through the app, you set your preferences. When you're finished setting your preferences, you more or less send those preferences to the energy by light, and they are stored in the energy by light. And after that, more or less, you don't need to use the app anymore to activate this human-centric lighting luminaire. You just have to turn it on and turn it off. And even if you change manually the brightness or color temperature to show to your colleague or to friends, when you turn it off and you turn it on again, it starts up in the set circadian rhythm at your location, because that's another advantage, is that no matter where you are, if you're in Canada, in Sweden, if you're in Scotland or in the United Kingdom, it automatically picks up the circadian daylight rhythm at your location. And Stephen mentioned that not everybody is the same. We have elderly people who have different preferences. We have young people. Maybe we have people with slightly visual impairment. That kind of preferences can all be set in the app, the energy by light. So our goal is by mimicking sunlight to improve your focus and to boost your biorhythm, but as well to improve your productivity. And at the end of the day, after your social activities, also ensure that you have a better sleep. That's our goal. Another advantage that comes with the energy by light is that these days we're doing much more and more Zoom meetings, Teams meetings, etc. And then often we see that poor lighting, which creates all kinds of shadows depending from where it comes from, gives you not that attractive look during the meetings. You look a little bit more tired, and thanks to the energy by light, that's a problem that no longer exists, because the energy by light really gives this vertical lighting from the front with no shadowing. And that's also one of the recent recommendations for video conferencing. And that's also being offered by the energy by light. As said, it comes with an app, and within the app you can set, of course, your circadian rhythm at your location. Depending on your preferences, you can set a brightness offset, a color temperature offset, plus or minus 20%. And you can even create a kind of offset of your circadian rhythm. And the reason why is that we have, let's say, the early birds, people who wake up early in the morning, they start up early in the morning, and we have the more late birds. So you can also plus or minus 2 hour define an offset of your circadian rhythm. Additional to that, we have added that you're able to set your end of regular lunch time, because During lunch, we take food to us, bread, sugars, etc., and our body starts to focus on more or less processing all that kind of food. And there is less energy, less blood to restart more or less processing the more complex brain tasks. Thanks to the energy by light, you get after your lunchtime an energy boost, more or less a brightness boost of lighting to ensure that your body gets in time up to speed to process those more complex tasks as well. That's all possible within the app. And as said before, you more or less set the preferences once, you send it over to the energy by light, and every morning or evening or even in the afternoon, when you turn on the energy by light, it automatically at that time gives the right brightness and the right color temperature according the circadian rhythm at your location, added with your preferences. For that, I have a nice video, and I'm gonna play it now for you, and it gives you a little bit more information. Apologies. Well, next slide is my end slide. If there are any questions, but I would like to hand over to Graham to start up the Q&A if there are specific questions to it, to my story, but also to, of course, the very interesting information that Stephen shared with us.
Thank you very much, John. In fact, look, after all of that information, the future's so bright, I've got to wear shades. So, listen, let's go to one final poll, and hopefully there's some difference here now. So, I'm going to ask the question: do you think the energy by light gives you more energy, better performance, and sleep? I can see some answers there. It's looking positive. Just give people a few more minutes to answer that one. And while people are doing that, I have a question before we even ask the question. In terms of this light, we've said yes, it could be used in the home office if you're working from home, or in a commercial office, or in a larger office space. If you're using it in a commercial office space, is there a sort of a best environment in terms of other lighting for this to be used within an office space, or do you recommend that people take their lighting out?
Well, I think Stephen agrees with me. We see this as an additional lighting.
Yeah.
It's not. I have to be honest. At my home office, I only use the energy by light. I don't use my ceiling lighting anymore. But in a larger office environment, it's an additional lighting to the ceiling lighting.
Yep.
And what's very important is that often the ceiling light only gives you light from above, the horizontal illumination, and the big advantage of the energy by light that also gives you the vertical illumination. So it really promotes or boosts your bio rhythm, and especially for activating the melatonin at the right time, this vertical illumination is very important.
Thank you.
Stephen, do you agree with my?
Yeah, I agree. Yes, I was going to say it's a very. I mean, you put everything pretty much in the right way. The thing about working from home is that we all have different tastes when it comes to lighting, and everybody's space is very personal, and everybody lights their space in a different way. And of course, there needs to be some way that we could introduce a light source that is works in every home space. It doesn't matter whether your workspace is in the kitchen or in your bedroom or wherever it might be, or you're lucky enough to have a space which is dedicated for it. Of course, most home spaces are not designed to be workspaces particularly. So we wanted to design a light source that you could just take out of the box, put it on the opposite side to your mouse, and it would basically light your space without having to think about all the other light sources that you've got in that room. You don't need them. You could just have this light source do everything.
Yeah.
And I think also when it comes to the office installation, also very, very easy. It will work with, of course, the ambient lighting, which is already there. And as John mentioned, the sort of the melatonin affecting part of this light source, which is the vertical illumination, is one of those things that's not. If I do a lighting calculation in an office space, the lighting that's designed for that has been designed so that it's only lighting the flat surface in front of you. It's not lighting your face. And of course, circadian lighting has to have vertical lighting to work. And that's why we made it a sort of self-illuminating design, but also the design of this tube is not overly lit, because one of those things that is very important when it comes to office lighting fixture design is that the surface brightness of a light fixture is in tune with the surface brightness of your screen, so that the brightness of the tube is not, or the brightness of the light fixture is not more than the screen, because then you end up with what's called this eye fatigue. As your eyes move from one surface to the next, it's constantly adjusting to control the brightness entering the eye, and this causes tiredness and headaches. So we've designed a light source that you can use within an office space as well as within a home space, and it doesn't overstrain your eyes. Brilliant. Considering what you're looking at.
Thank you for answering that. I knew it was a question I know other people are going to ask. There's some questions that have been asked and have already been answered, but we'll just cover them quickly as well. Is it mains powered or rechargeable? Currently it's mains powered. There was another question that has been answered, which is, does the light source provide directional light like daylight? Well, you covered there that this is providing both that vertical ambient light, but it's also got some kind of asymmetric light frame coming from it as well. Yes,
it is. It's a dual directional light source. As John mentioned in his presentation, when it comes to Of course, angle poised lighting, which is generally how you would light your home office space. You've only got one direction of light, and it's all directed onto the flat surface in front of you, the horizontal working plane, as it's called. And we, of course, want to have something that also lights the vertical plane, which is this directly in front of your eyes, which is a surface that is never included in calculations, but is now being included in calculations. So if you look at these norms, it mentions the fact that vertical illuminance is now becoming an important aspect of office lighting or workspace lighting, whereas in the past it was just ignored.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Someone's asked, can you share any of the links to the lighting guides, etc.? I'm sure that will be done as part of the process today.
Yeah.
Good question here. Can the ambient and task light intensity be set individually? Or is it one setting for both of those lights?
It's one thing.
Yeah.
They're both tied together.
Because otherwise the cadence would be out, wouldn't it?
Yes,
Yeah,
I mean, exactly, John. Sorry.
No problem. That's one. And what we have is that more or less the intensity is already different because of the setup of the energy by light. To explain a little bit more in detail, what the idea that Stephen came up with is to use two different folies within the energy by light. One to direct the light, and another one to diffuse the light to create the ambient light. And by cutting the diffuse folly, let's say the diffuse light folly with a task window, you have the more intense task light directing to your task area, your keyboard and your document. And the rest of the light is diffused as an ambient light through the system. But we use one light source, and that ensures us that the right brightness and the right color temperature is both correct according to the circadian rhythm for the ambient light as well for the task light.
I think you've answered this next one by the whole presentation, but correct me if I'm wrong. What suggestions do you have for the design of lighting to accommodate everyone's light sensitivities? Offer ways to reduce light brightness.
Well, again, yeah, exactly. But everybody's different. So everybody has a slightly different tolerance, I guess, to light, and this is one of the reasons why we also put in the ability to manually dim this light source. So on top of the light source, on top of the light fixture, I should say, there is you have the ability to change the brightness and also to change the color to your own personal preference at that time. Of course, the idea behind the light source itself is that it should be conducive in its normal state with everybody. We've kind of designed it so that it's not too bright, but it gives you a nice bright amount of light in the place where you want it. But of course, somebody might want to have a less amount of light at some point in the daytime. So we basically have this ability to dim it or to change the color for a certain length of time. It's programmed in, and then it will revert back into its circadian function, which is what it's all about, really.
Yeah, and additional to your explanation, Stephen, you could read the question. Maybe it's because of my lack of English, but you could read the question in two different ways. Can the ambient light and task light set individually? Ambient light and task light. You could also read the question, can it be more or less set for each individual in an office environment? And in this case, your personal preferences are stored in your app settings. And imagine you're in a hot desking environment where an energy by light is put under the hot desk. You get to the hot desk, you connect your app, automatically send your settings to the energy by light, and it picks up your personal preferences for that specific energy by light on the hot desk within a hot desking environment.
No, that's brilliant. So actually, everybody, it's flexible, isn't it? It's incredibly flexible and inclusive in terms of its design from that point of view.
It's one of the main things that it's one of the biggest things that people complain about is the lack of autonomy that they have with their lighting situation. If you go into most office spaces, they don't have any control over the lighting at all. and if you give them some control, they feel so much happier about it. The basic studies show that on a regular basis, 80% of the people you ask that are in an office space, it's the one thing that they always complain about, is that 80% of them, well, they don't have any control over the lighting, and that's something that they would like to have. And if you give it to them, then they're always positive about that.
I can see this making a lot of facilities managers very, very happy indeed, because it's an absolute nightmare for facilities teams, and especially if we've got assessors, which I know that we have on this call today. You know, what do you recommend when they're there? There's then a policy that you cannot recommend anything to do with the lighting, because we can't just take strips out for people. But if you've got a solution that you could put in place on top of what's already there, then there's a solution.
And it's also a very sustainable solution, because it has, the energy by light really has a long lamp life, over 50,000 hours guaranteed. It has really a low power consumption. I think full power, it's 16 watt, dimmed 8 watt, so between 8 and 16 watt. And we are looking to get in recent time of period also to get certain parts of the energy by light made from elephant grass, which makes it also very sustainable. Elephant grass is a kind of grass sort between bamboo and how you say it? We call it in the Netherlands a riet. I have no idea how you call it in English. And a field of elephant grass consumes 4 times more carbon dioxide than the same area of wood.
That is.
So we're really working on a lot of areas to make this perfect solution.
I'm conscious of time. I'm conscious of time, folks, because we've just gone over the hour. I've got one final question for you, which is just because it was covered in the presentation itself. You covered SAD. So if people have this light, have you done any testing with sufferers? Do you know if you have this light? Do you now need to not have an SAD light as well? This covers that?
Well, I think the thing is that most people that do feel depressed in the wintertime, they don't even have an SAD light. They haven't probably gone as far as to get a diagnosis. Right. I know, just talking when I was growing up with my mom, I know that she was always much lower in the winter time than she was in the summertime. Yeah. And I think that a lot of, I think it is one of those aspects of the light fixture that I would like to think, and I'm pretty sure that it will have a positive effect on people, about not just about how they do the work, but how that affects them in the wintertime. It gives a certain amount of vertical illuminance, which has been proven to have a positive effect on your physiology. That is something that is scientifically known. So I think that it would have a positive effect on people that don't clearly get enough vertical or enough daylight, especially in their workspaces in the wintertime. I think any amount of light that you can work with on a long period of time. I mean, people use SAD lighting for short periods during the day because it's a very intense source. You can't look at this all day long, but this is having an accumulative effect over time on you that ties you back into lighting which you are basically missing. It'd
be quite nice to do some studies on that, wouldn't it? As this,
it's one of those things that we will do. Absolutely, yeah. I mean,
very interesting. And I think that the energy by light contributes to a more balanced day-night rhythm compared to SAD lighting, because what Stephen mentioned, it really more or less gives you a boost to fully recharge the battery. But this one really supports your biorhythm throughout the whole day, and not just this half-hour overwhelming SAD lighting. So that, I think that's also a big difference with the most SAD lighting, that this is a kind of, it's the sunlight in your workspace, which is there whole day.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jan, for asking that. What's the unit cost? Do you provide discounts for bulk orders? And if so, what quantity triggers the discounts? Stephen Howe will be answering that for you sometime after this call. What's the launch date and availability? When are we likely to see this in the UK?
In short time. We are currently starting up production, and we have had our first production run, second production run, and we are moving now to the first large production run, which will be finished within a few weeks. Yeah, place your orders, and you will get the Energy Bill Light within a few weeks on your desk.
Folks, thanks for today. Thanks for answering all of those questions. It was a fascinating presentation. Thanks to both of you. I thought I knew quite a lot about lighting, but I learned some more today, which is always a good thing. And the biology bit was mind-blowing. If you haven't learned something out of today's webinar, then I'd be very, very surprised. Thanks to everyone that's attended. Do keep in touch, and we will be getting those bits of information out to you very shortly in terms of brochures and further information. If you've got any more questions, please do focus those in via the website chat, because we will be able to export that chat anyway, and we'll be back to you shortly. For now, thank you very much for joining us today, and I hope you've enjoyed this presentation.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.